How's it going, everybody? My name's Warner Fields with Fields of Profit. Today I'm here with my friend Nick, who has got an awesome story as an Amazon seller. He is still working the 9 to 5 job and doing over $100,000 a month in sales on Amazon. So I'm super excited to break this down with you guys. But if you just want to briefly introduce yourself, Nick, maybe let us know how you got into this crazy world of Amazon. We'll just roll from there.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Warner. I am an OG eBay person. So back in 1999, I was like 12 or 13 at the time, set up the eBay account. And the first product that we ever bought was from the Adidas outlet out in southeastern Pennsylvania, the Amish area of Lancaster. Found some size 13 track shoes down in the bottom corner. Nobody really saw there. And that was like the first thing that we were flipping. I've been doing that for a long time, played sports my whole life and was gravitated around that competitive mindset. Fast forward a couple decades there, and around COVID started seeing, hey, like these PlayStations, they're flipping pretty good. So that was like the main thing where I started looking at it and was like, okay, I can get these. I have a software engineering background. So I was like, let me see if I could write up a script or find out. And that was really like the launch into the botting days of being able to get into cook groups, which are communities within Discord to find products low and then resell them. So that was the journey. I did that for a couple years and saw the writing on the wall that the margins weren't quite as good in the botting community. We were coming out of COVID. Everybody was getting back into normal lives. Found your content, found Miles's content. And that was really the starting point to really starting it into taking Amazon, looking at it as, oh, this is something that I could.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a cool journey. I didn't know you've been in the reselling game that long. Do you remember any of the craziest like eBay flips you had? Anything that really sticks out to you?
In the early days for the eBay side, I wasn't like super active with it because I was so integrated with sports, but I used a lot of it. Just like I would get different things like used bats, gloves and stuff. So just stuff that I was able to acquire that people were like, hey, we're not using this anymore. And it was a great way just to have some supplemental cash.
Yeah, that's awesome. Honestly, if you guys are watching, you're like, oh, man, I want to start Amazon. I got $200 though. That's still the way to do it is you're going out there finding cheap stuff, hitting the thrift stores, like whatever you got to do, build up that money. And then you stumble into opportunities like pools and PS5s and all that kind of stuff, turn it into that real Amazon business. So through that process, do you remember what was that first item that you sold on Amazon? Because it's totally different. Like with reselling stuff, it's, oh, this makes sense. Used bats, cheap. I see why people buy it. PS5, it's hard to find. On Amazon, what is happening here? Why are you buying this? Do you remember what was that first item that you ended up selling on Amazon?
Yep. First item was actually the Disney mugs. They were 50th anniversary edition. So I had a couple of those. I listed them FBM and then I took almost like a year off from doing it. I don't know
Gotcha.
why. Like I had the account set up. I didn't do anything with it. And then it came back around and I was botting Legos. I had a bunch of Legos that I was botting around Q4. I didn't have them listed in time for that, but those were some of the first ones after watching your content, watching Miles, getting the gist where that was the turning point to be like, okay, I'm going to take this serious now.
I gotcha. Yeah. So as far as like botting goes, would you say that opportunity is completely gone? Because I know some people are still thinking about doing that type of stuff.
No, I think it's a great supplement. Use your experience regardless of whatever you have. If it's eBay, if it's botting, if it's something else, any of those types of things, once you have that as a skill in your toolbox, don't forget about it. There's different modes that you can create that different sellers may not be thinking about. So if you have a skill, whatever that skill is, look for different creative ways to incorporate it into your business. And that was one of the big things that I looked at was, okay, I have this previous background. Before getting into Amazon, how do I take some of that and then apply it to this new business opportunity that's here?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen you do some crazy stuff in the lab using that background. We'll dive into that as well. But for that guy or girl, they're probably watching this video. They're trying to get started on Amazon. Right? So you mentioned it was the mugs. Do you remember how you stumbled across that product and like how should that new seller, how should they find their first product?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to depend on how much initial capital that you have to start with. So, if you're a newer seller and you're time rich and you're cash poor, I would agree with all of the rest of the guidance of starting with retail arbitrage. It gives you the ability to be able to grab a product, you can feel it, you can touch it, you can see what the price is for it, you can use SellerAmp directly in there to scan it. It's such a great way to start learning products and learning how to read data. If you have a little bit more capital to work with, then same type of thing, going on online arbitrage and being able to apply those different skill sets. So I think it really depends on what your initial starting point is. And more importantly, what are you good at? If a specific niche and you already have a skill set, like you came from botting shoe world, that makes perfect sense. You're an outdoor person, go start looking at some of those areas. So go with something that you have a or previous knowledge in and apply that to your Amazon journey.
Yeah, that's super useful. It just keeps you more interested at the beginning too. If it's like something you're already somewhat familiar with, then it's not just, why am I throwing makeup into a box? This stuff's confusing. Like, yeah, I like that. And then in case you guys are brand new, all the online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, that's just buying from either websites if it's online, or retail, we're going out to the stores, that kind of stuff, just in case it's the first time you heard those terms there. So you're taking advantage of the mugs and getting the ball rolling. Sounds like you forgot about it for a while. At what point in the business did things start clicking? You're like, okay, I'm able to start finding items pretty consistently. And I know a lot of people, they just never get to that point. So like, how much time did you put in the business before you started to be like, okay, I'm getting it now?
Yeah, it was a full year after doing the very first purchase. And then at that point, I started from scratch. It was January. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take this seriously now. My wife and I talked and we're like, hey, if we're doing this, we're going 100%.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's a family commitment, right? So we looked at it like, okay, we're definitely going to do this. And then I didn't waste a whole lot of time at that point. I watched some of your content, I watched some of Miles' content, and jumped right into the roadmap and coaching and said, hey, I want to learn this blueprint, how to do it right. You don't need to recreate the wheel. Just follow where your mentors have been. And I used that as like my stepping point. And to answer your question, I would say the first 3 months, they were hard. And that's
sure.
exactly what you need to go through. And it's one of those things like, hey, you can see that others have already made this successful. So the process works. There's something you want. It's like anything else. Like you have to put the sweat equity in to learn and get the reps. So I would say it was a good 3 months or so before I was starting to feel what the fundamentals were. And that's when I started getting more into actually putting my face into the community, doing that first video, which the camera is very heavy first time you hit the record button. And that's really where I was like, okay, I'm starting to get the grasp. Still have a ton to learn, but at least there's that moment of, okay, I see a light at that tunnel. I see that this is a model that we can work with.
Yeah, for sure. I hear that couple month milestone pretty often. Like the people who are just like absolutely no life in it, maybe it's 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of people, it's 3 to 4 months. Most people just never get there. You try a side hustle for 2 weeks. Oh, it doesn't work. Like I didn't make money. I didn't get the Lambo right away. Like all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I like what you're talking about with picking up the camera, getting your face out there. But you and I got to hang out this past weekend at a wedding with lots of other Amazon sellers who were also brave enough to pick up the camera and put themselves out there. So like, why was that so important for your growth as an Amazon seller? Because it seems counterintuitive. Like, why should I tell other people what I'm doing?
Yeah. And so I think that's the biggest thing there is it really is a group project with a lot of these things. And not just in the Amazon community, but in the business communities themselves, right? And I'll use this as an example, right? That first 3 months, part of the reason that was so hard is I was doing that entirely by myself at that point. I'm making mistakes and I'm learning them the hard way. As soon as I started interacting more in the community, asking questions, going through and finding other sellers that were at my level at the time, now I can make one mistake, share that mistake with the rest of the group. And likewise, they make a mistake that I haven't made yet. I just avoided a landmine. Like that in itself is so important. You learn different styles of sourcing. You learn different areas where you need to be careful for things. You have another set of eyes to vet a keep it chart and essentially be able to look at it and say, all right, no, I don't see that in the data. So it gives you a way to have a mastermind or a group to roll with. And
yeah, not to mention it's just more fun. It's going to be way more fun if you're talking with a couple of the guys at 11 p.m. sourcing the big sale. That's what it's all about. It's going to be way more fun. Yeah.
Like, yes, you're talking business, you're talking sourcing, but you're also having normal conversations too. And you remove that loneliness aspect of trying to do it by yourself.
Yeah, if you got the bills taken care of, you got some people to talk to. That covers pretty much most of the things you need as a human, right? Yeah, that's awesome. For that person, they've heard that before probably. If they watched any other videos, like they're like, all right, I got to make some connection. You said that you're reaching out to people. Like, what's the easiest way for that new seller to find another Amazon seller to talk to?
Yeah, honestly, I would say just do the opening video, get on the camera. It doesn't matter what you say. It's probably going to be horrible. It does not matter. Everybody that has done it remembers their first one. And it just gives you a playing field because now the community has a name and a face and they know that you're starting out on the journey. And if you see a DM in your inbox, you're more likely to pick it up. New person, that was awesome when they answered my question. Let's go ahead and make sure that we're doing the same for the new sellers.
Yeah, yeah. The guy with the boxes or like the bars in their profile picture, they got FBA in the name. They're getting their question or probably a better quality answer at least than the guy with the American flag. Never posted ever. Like it's just an anonymous like profile. Like they're definitely getting better feedback. So yeah, I like that. So I also want to dive into some of the 9 to 5 stuff. So obviously you still have a full-time job. And I know most people watching this video, they're not going to have the luxury of ditching the job right away. Like they got family to support, all that kind of stuff. How much time are you spending on the business versus your 9 to 5 right now?
Yep. So I dedicate 8 p.m. to midnight every day. The way we structure it is, so I have a wife and 2 kids. We have the morning session where we're getting them out the door. We have the 9 to 5 throughout the day. And then we slot 5 to 7:30 as family time. And then we've used that as our structure structure for the whole duration. And there's definitely some days, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, where you just don't feel like doing it, but you know that it's just part of the journey. Like some of the days are not the best in terms of successful wins in the micro of the day, the week. But when you zoom out and you look at it over a quarter or a year, you're like, wow, like those little tiny additional wins along the way are what set that up. So if you are currently working a 9 to 5 job, you have other responsibilities outside of your Amazon business, just know this is a model that you can do. You will make sacrifices for that. And I think that's an important thing, because that journey in itself, you'll start removing these limited beliefs that you've had going through school and different things that you've learned, that now you're starting to look at things in a different light, that, hey, it's not a matter of, oh, can I do this? I'm going to do it. And it's just going to be a timing and a patience thing that you have to go through.
Yeah, it's interesting. Most people outside of like the business world, you think about starting a business, it's, oh, it's like a big, giant, monumental task. It's not like you're spending $100 on something here. You started a business, right? And yeah, that limiting belief, like that kind of stuff. I especially see it with the longer people have had the 9 to 5 job, the more they've been for decades just told that they can't go out and do something super successful. But I love being able to talk to people like you who just prove that is objectively not true. And the other thing that I hear a lot when I talk to people like you who are crushing, still have the 9 to 5 is, well, you're making all this money. Why don't you ditch the 9 to 5? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, why do you still have the 9 to 5?
Yeah. So I think this is something from reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? So quick summary of that. There's two different types of mindset. Yes, we're thinking in monetary, rich and poor, but it's also rich and poor from a mindset perspective. When you go through and think of it like, all right, the money that you're making from your 9 to 5, yes, you're working for money, but what are you doing with? I'm taking those assets, I'm putting them away, and I'm putting them toward an investment in an Amazon business. So now you have additional capital that you can turn over that you wouldn't have been turning over in your traditional S&P or other opportunities that are there. And the other piece of it that's not normally put into the equation is the education aspect. So now I just learned, I applied that. I went through a whole month cycle or an inventory turn. I learned all these different skill sets that come with becoming a business owner. Those things are so important. So if someone's thinking about looking at their 9 to 5, I think everyone's going to have a different journey of that, of when it's appropriate for them to say, hey, do I want to take the leap and do this full time? So my advice on that, because I'm grappling with the same thing, like what is the right time to do that full investment in myself? And I think that's something that everyone has to look at. What are their responsibilities and things that they need to do? Just know that it doesn't need to be a black and white decision on that. Hey, I'm jumping and I'm just going all in tomorrow. It can be a gradual thing where you're building up your asset side that you look down at in 6 months and say, you know what? I put enough of a reserve away. This is a great time to go ahead and take the calculated risk.
Yeah. And it's not the typical like entrepreneur advice you'll get either, right? It's keep the job. It's very contrary to a lot of the hustle culture and all that kind of stuff you see out there. But like you're talking about, you're just using that money that you're making at the job and betting on your own company. You're not betting on the S&P. You're not betting on Tesla stock. Like you're betting on Nick Incorporated, right? Because you know that you can go every month, you're going to get, 25, 30, 35% ROI every single month on those products. Yeah. So there's no reason to ditch all that behind. Another thing that we talked about a little bit is the botting, integrating some of that software engineering experience. Is there an example of something cool you've been able to do with that coding background that has applied for your Amazon business?
Yes, I started doing a lot of looking at the big box retailers, some of their source code that they just put directly in the browser and seeing the type of information. So a lot of the common ones early in that journey, I would find the UPCs and the EAN. So those unique identifiers that you can do. Now, what I've learned through that lesson, I think this was an important one, was I still needed to learn the fundamentals of Amazon, because you realize the best opportunities are in the mismatches. They're in different aspects. So being able to take a step back and say, okay, I have an engineering background, but I don't have the fundamentals yet of this business model. So that was something that I did early on, is I said, okay, let me just take a step back. I'm going to learn the fundamentals, and then started saying, okay, this skill set, software engineering, how do I apply it to solve my own problems? And I use that as a way, okay, now let me go ahead and use that to script out the different tabs for Keep a Product Finder. So I don't need to type in all the different ones. Let me just put a list together that has the 50 brands that I want to look at, and then pipe them into different Keep a Product Finder search. So like that's an example of it's tactical, but it solves a problem that I need to have, which is how do I source more efficiently? And I used some of those micro learnings from that. Another one's around coupons. Like you can find things around coupon code that may not be as readily available just by looking into the source or looking a little bit differently than where most people are generally checking.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so much you can do there, and I'm sure you're just scratching the surface in terms of what that skill set will be able to apply for Amazon there. And I know you're touching a little bit on how you're actually sourcing the products. That's probably where most people are at watching this this video, they're trying to find those first couple products. I assume you're probably doing a little bit of like storefront stocking, that kind of stuff back in the day. Like, how has your sourcing evolved over the days? Is it the same? What have you changed to really scale up?
Yeah, so my journey, I went staying with the same theme, right? Don't recreate the wheel. So I followed your blueprint and I said, all right, I'm going to start with storefront stalking. I'm going to learn from these sellers. What are all the different stores in play? Then the next natural progression was to move to keep a product finder, coming more from a analytical background. It gravitated more toward where I like to be because you can run different experiments, right? So if you're looking for things in Q4, all right, we're looking for quick movers. We're looking for things where offer counts fell off a cliff that we can go ahead and try to turn them quickly via merchant fulfilled. Very different than if you're looking for an experiment around seasonal products where you're looking at larger ranges. You'll see the bestseller ranking potentially a lot higher and then the drop off of there. So keep a product finder was a good way to be able to think things in the macro and human psychology of, oh, they're probably going to want to buy these types of products at this window. So let me source them 2 months prior to that or start doing the investigation 2 months prior. And then the third wave of that was the manually sourcing piece, right? So they're the best bang for your buck, generally speaking, is going to be in those, but it's also the most time consuming. So you want to pick at that point, it's okay, I know this is my core group of websites that I like to go from. I've learned their sales cycles, I've learned their coupons and the ways to manufacture margin. And then manually sourcing becomes more efficient at that matter because you already have a background of it. So I'd say that's my journey. You don't have to get crazy with it. Just follow the steps and you'll know the natural time to start looking into the next.
Yeah, that's the progression that it's like a sliding scale. Like it's almost like whatever your sales per month is up to 100, like 100K a month is probably mostly manual sourcing. The 0 a month is probably all reverse sourcing. It's a nice little sliding scale there. Yeah. So as you've been like going through the years here as an Amazon seller, reselling, all that kind of stuff, what was that moment where you knew that reselling or Amazon selling, you're like, all right, this can be a legit major income? Was it a big item you hit on? Like, what was that moment for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it was once I had a core group to roll with, having the Zoom chat, realizing that this doesn't need to be as hard if you work as a team. And so for me, that was about 6 months in where I started recognizing, okay, I'm starting to see the sales progression is going up. I'm starting to be able to find some products that are a little bit more easier to find. I'm starting to learn a couple websites there. So I'd say that that was the key point. There wasn't like where some folks may have that aha moment. There wasn't
yeah.
like, it was more of just like a natural progression of this slow build. I didn't have 12 to 16 hours a day to be able to do it. So it took me longer doing them every day in the 4-hour increments. But I think that was a good path because I didn't have a moment where I had this massive, I had bad buys. Everyone has bad buys, but I didn't have one at that point in time that was like this massive one that takes you out of the equation. And at that point, you start questioning from a confidence perspective, is this the right opportunity? So I think that helped is just doing the small regressions. And then instead of like the big bang Chad scale on one item.
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective though. A lot of people will be like, oh, is this one specific item? And it's okay if you don't have that one specific item you find really early, you're making a bunch of money on. I'm like you on that. Like I don't have a ton of like crazy hits that I've had over the years. It's always just hit a couple base hits every day. And like you're saying, like those small wins, they seriously add up.
Consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. So before you started selling on Amazon, obviously there's a ton of things that people think are true about Amazon. What was one of those that was like a really big misconception that you had that just totally wasn't true?
So first I thought everything that was on Amazon was sold by Amazon. So that was
Right. I think a lot of
That
people
was the
still think
first
that.
that was the first misconception, and then I didn't realize just how well-oiled of a machine and the processes and the procedures that were there. I was always detail-oriented, but this was a whole new level of detail-oriented. From having a reselling background, like, I had an Excel spreadsheet of things that, "It's my buy cost, this is what I sold it for," but not to the level that's required for as an Amazon seller. So anyone starting out, if you don't have a buy sheet where you're tracking your inventory down to each order and all of the details that you're going to need for supply chain, start that today. That was an early lesson that I learned the first time that I had a complaint that I needed to produce documentation. That was a lesson learned that moving forward, I knew, okay, I needed to have much better records of all of my invoices and how I set up my own internal systems and my checklist that I'm going through. And I think that's super important, right? That was the biggest, I wouldn't say misconception, but I think eye-opening moment in the Amazon community is because everything in terms of policies and procedures procedures and documents is where it's at. I needed to up my own game to make sure I knew that I was prepared to be a successful business owner.
It's a real business, right? Like eBay, all that kind of stuff. Like you can get by just Excel sheet, like doing whatever. But it's a good idea to at least have some know where you can find your invoices, know where you like actually bought everything. Like that's going to be super, super valuable for you. So along the journey, right? So what was one thing that might have worked for you as a small seller that you realized you had to cut it off to really scale your business?
It's the chasing the shiny object syndrome. I really had to change that mindset. I was like, okay, I want to go learn wholesale and OA and private label. And you'd have all the opportunities that you hear about there. And for me, it was, all right, I need to focus on one thing I knew and one thing to learn. And I use that as my framework even now. And it's a tough thing to keep in mind because you're always seeing different opportunities that are starting to come up. And I use that now as my model. Okay, is this something that I know already and can apply, whether it's previous experiences from before? I just need to put it into the lens of what the new thing is, or is this something that needs to be deferred for later? And I think that's an important distinction is you're always going to have different opportunities that come up, and it's knowing, is it something that meets the portfolio for now, or is it something that you stow away in the back of your head or on a whiteboard and say, I'm going to come back to this at this point in time because then it'll be relevant to wherever you're at in your journey.
Yeah, I like the way you're breaking that down. I like to look at a lot of that stuff is if you want to start something new, you have something that can help you do it faster. Like you have a competitive advantage over somebody starting it brand new, and you can nearly guarantee it's going to make you more money than doing your existing thing. Probably worth starting. And a lot of times, like, oh, I'm a reseller and I want to do private label. There's not a ton of overlap there. And that can be like that big shiny object like you're talking about there. Yeah, not that you shouldn't pursue those new projects, but a lot of time there's like that connection you can use to make way more money rather than trying to be on a level playing field with people who haven't made any money online before. Yeah, I like the way you're breaking that down. I've never heard it broken down that way. That's cool. So as far as your team goes, do you have any virtual assistants? Do you have any help? Obviously, you're strapped on time. Prep centers, what have you implemented to save time?
Yep. So I probably started that journey earlier than I should have looking
Sure.
back on it because I didn't know, like I knew how to work with people. That was more of like a corporate background, but I didn't have all the skill sets on the Amazon to how to teach the virtual talent. Now, with that being said, I think there were some really good learnings with that. My first thing that I looked at in terms of where areas to delegate or to be able to remove from things that I'm personally prioritizing, I did follow the prep, right? I wanted to make sure I got that out of there. I didn't have a whole lot of time to waste on it.
Right.
So I did go through and I got a prep center, learned what that was like and how you are able to manufacture margin with being able to be in a tax-free state. I thought that was a good decision, outsourcing that early for me personally. Now, where I want to caveat it with is there's going to be opportunity buys, right? So I also learned that with some of those opportunity buys, doing the merchant fulfillment, sometimes you got to put your sweat equity in there. So it's not an either or, it's a know when to use which avenue when it's appropriate. So I think that was one thing. So I definitely went and got the prep center set up. So that way I knew I had that as a tool in the toolbox to buy back some time. That's been the equation. Is how do I find different ways to buy back time when appropriate? Then I'd say the next logical one was to start having virtual talent. So I split a virtual assistant with another seller and we started with the sourcing angle for that. In hindsight, I probably would have started with admin. So remove the negative ROI or the low ROI task, and admin is a great way to do that. But I learned through that journey how to start to teach and train, and I learned where my own gaps in knowledge were. And I think that was a big piece. I'm looking at some of these charts and I'm giving advice on things. And then 3 months later, the advice that I was putting in some of the Loom videos literally is the complete opposite.
It's just wrong. Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I like that. Yeah. Having to teach people something teaches you a lot. And in case you, VA virtual assistant, in case you guys are unaware, just like we typically hire from the Philippines, Colombia, that kind of thing, super cheap labor. But yeah, teaching your team is definitely a good way to level up your game for sure.
good. And just, I
Cool.
think just to wrap up on that piece, like I would say admin is a big one that I do now. I do less on the sourcing. I keep that one closer at this stage in the game, but admin is definitely one of the higher leverage items to use virtual talent for. So I've been focusing more on that aspects of things and keeping track of the important things within that side, especially account health, staying on top of your account health, staying on top of your inventory and making sure all those messages are addressed. So those are some of the key areas that I'm using for it.
Yeah, those make you way less money than sourcing products, but everyone wants to give away the most valuable thing in their business first for some reason. So I like that. I like that advice there. Looking forward into the future, like are you doing about 100 grand a month right now? What's holding you back from 200, 300? What's the goal and what's holding you back from that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, so I'm at the fork in the road where I'm now looking to say, so last year was learn the Amazon business. This year is to diversify risk is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of maintaining the Amazon business and looking at the margins on a month by month basis on, so I use QuickBooks for all of my accounting, and I'm starting to use the data and the business decisions to determine what the next set is. So for me, the next set is less on focusing on the top line, still relevant, but at the end of the day, it's what's the bottom line look like.
Yeah. That you don't eat on top line. You eat on the bottom line.
So I think I'm at a good spot where I'm at now in terms of the monthly revenue pieces. Obviously, going to always look for practical areas for growth. And then going back to the lesson of the one thing and the one thing to learn, I think the next area is to start finding there's other areas, there's pain points I've had where I can bring that software skill set and apply that back to the community. So I do see myself staying in that area of being in the Amazon business as one revenue stream and then starting to look for other opportunities in the software side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that parallel income, like the connected skills, like we're talking about. And another reason why you'll be able to do that is because you picked up the camera, you got friends. Hey, I just built this new thing. You want to test it out? You got 25 people who test it out, give you feedback in the same day, and you just can't replicate that unless you picked up that camera on a couple months into the journey, right? Yeah, that's awesome. So for that guy or girl that are watching this video, they made $0 in sales, $1,000 in sales. They're just getting started. What are those first couple action items that they should go take care of right now so they can get on their way to a serious Amazon business?
Yeah, if you haven't sold your first product, go sell your first product. It really doesn't matter. It's not a matter of whatever the margin is that you get on it. It's the experience that you learn from doing it. And the other piece of it is just literally just start within the community. I think that's super important. You'll be able to start learning who are the names and the faces there. You'll be able to start finding answers to your questions by reading the timeline. And once you know who are some of the folks to follow on there, they will answer your questions. Do your own research first, but ask a good, intelligent question. You will get a response back.
Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate you hopping on here, sharing some value, Nick. If anybody wants to reach out to you, potentially connect with you over on Twitter, Instagram, where can they find you?
Yep. So it's Nick Spizek _ on all socials, and DMs are always open.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get those linked down below. Go drop Nick a follow. He's awesome. Always dropping some cool stuff on the timeline. I've picked up a couple gems from the Nick Twitter, so he's a great follow. If you guys did get value from this video, please feel free to subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Let us know if you have any questions down below as well. But I really appreciate you guys watching this video. Thanks for taking the time again, Nick, and I will see you guys next time.